Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished speakers and guests, it's my immense pleasure and privilege on behalf of the group of women ambassadors here in Geneva and our partners, the International Trade Center, the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, UNDP, and the World Bank, to welcome you all here for this important event, The Power of Empowered Women 2. My name is Amanda Ellis. I'm the New Zealand Permanent Representative to the United Nations here in Geneva, and proud New Zealand was the first country in the world where women won the right to vote. I'm honoured on behalf of my wonderful colleagues who have delivered you the most delicious lunch and all have worked incredibly hard to put on today's event. Thank you, wonderful colleagues from the Lipstick Club. After the huge success of last year's inaugural event, which I wish I'd been here to attend in person, it was decided that the power of empowered women would be on a smaller scale every second year to examine a specific theme in more depth. Our focus today is on women's economic empowerment and women's contributions to inclusive growth, what the World Bank calls shared prosperity, and of course, in the context of a Sustainable Development Agenda post-2015. There are two linked events, our panel discussion today and tonight's ITC Ethical Fashion Show from cotton to catwalk. Ladies and gentlemen, talent is everywhere. Opportunity is not. In no country in the world has gender equality yet been achieved. So our panel discussion today has two aims. First, to explore why women's economic empowerment actually matters, and not just for women and girls, but for everyone. And second, to explore what practical action everyone in the audience can commit to making today to help advance this transformative agenda. To help us, I am humbled and honoured to be joined by 5 transformative women leaders from around the world, from civil society and corporate, an economist and entrepreneurs representing every region. First, on my right, Jennifer Blanca from both Switzerland and the United States is the chief economist at the World Economic Forum. On my left, Stella Jean is from Haiti and Italy, a fashion designer with her own label. Benedicta Nayonga from Uganda is the executive director of the Chinawataka Women's Initiative and famous for turning trash into cash. Camilla Siddiqui from Afghanistan is the owner and chief executive of Kayawan Business Development Services. And finally, Meeta Singh from India is the global director of sustainable business for Unilever. I am pleased too to give a special welcome to my colleagues, permanent representatives from these countries here today, along with the ambassadors for the African Union, the European Union, and the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, who plays such a crucial role in supporting and promoting this important agenda here in Geneva. Former US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright used to joke there was a special place in hell for women who didn't support other women. The group of women ambassadors here in Geneva would like to suggest there is a special place in heaven for all our male colleagues working so hard with us to advance women's economic empowerment, and especially for those here today. We will now begin our formal proceedings with an address from the most senior woman in the UN system, Helen Clark, UNDP Administrator.
Delighted to be supporting this initiative of the group of women ambassadors in Geneva and the International Trade Center on women's empowerment and economic development. Millennium Development Goal 3 made the advancement of gender equality and women's empowerment a global priority. But despite considerable progress, particularly in improving access to education for girls and expanding women's political participation, women's economic opportunities often continue to be limited by structural factors, social norms, and even legal barriers. Women are more likely to be working in the informal sector, which is so often poorly remunerated and precarious, and which often doesn't give access to social protection. In many countries, women entrepreneurs face gender-based barriers when starting and growing their businesses. Those may include legal barriers to owning and inheriting property, and limited access to markets, technology, information, or credit. But when given the opportunity, women almost invariably demonstrate their ability to contribute to economic growth and prosperity for their families and their communities. As the UN's member states are deliberating on the post-2015 development agenda, events like today's are very important in reminding us all that without equal opportunity for women, both to benefit from and contribute to economic development, countries just won't reach their full potential. So I wish all present the very best for this important event, and thank you all for the work you do to support the economic empowerment of women.
And Ms Clark is at a very important event hosted by UK Foreign Secretary and Angelina Jolie in London, so is unable to join us today. Forget China, forget India, forget the internet. Economic growth is driven by women. When The Economist magazine published that headline back in 2007, many were surprised to learn that women contributed more to global growth in the previous decade than emerging economic powerhouse China. Since then, there has been increasing attention to the critical role of women in macroeconomic growth. Multilateral institutions like the UN and my former employer, the World Bank, have demonstrated greater gender equality correlates not only with lower poverty rates, with a positive multiplier effect for girls, but also with higher growth outcomes. Gender equality is smart economics. Even the private sector has joined the chorus clamoring for change. Investment bank Goldman Sachs estimates per capita incomes could be as much as 20% higher by 2030 if we could just close the employment gender gap. I'm delighted now to introduce our first speaker, Jennifer Blanker. Jennifer, in your role as Chief Economist at the World Economic Forum, you've engaged in groundbreaking work on competitiveness, and your organisation also produces an annual Global Gender Gap Report. Please set the scene for us.
Thanks, Amanda. And I am very pleased to be here today to talk about an issue that I think all of us find is very, very critical. When you think about the issue of gender empowerment, I think usually it's been looked at through a human rights lens. And that makes a lot of sense, but as Amanda mentioned, there is very much a bottom line economic story here as well, and an imperative that really drives the importance of empowering women to participate in the economy. Now, to put this in context, as Amanda mentioned, at the World Economic Forum, we have been producing studies on competitiveness for several decades. And when we're talking about competitiveness, we're really looking at productivity. So we're looking at all of the factors that are driving sustainable prosperity. And here we look at things that range from the more basic to the more complex. So institutions and governance, education and health. We're looking at the functioning of markets, goods, labor, and financial markets, and of course, talent and innovation, as well as the adoption of the latest technologies. And it's clear that integrating women better into the economy is a critical driver of competitiveness in and of itself, and also as it plays through all of these issues that I just mentioned. And so it's something that's very important, and also, as Amanda mentioned, because of this, we not only do an annual global competitiveness report, but we also do an annual global gender gap report, which allows us to then look at the correlation specifically between closing the gap in terms of gender parity and economic outcomes, and we see that there is a very high correlation indeed. So I think in general it's pretty obvious that it's very important to look at integrating women better into the economy, and that there is a bottom line fundamental outcome associated with it. But for those who might be skeptical, luckily there is some data that backs this up, and already Amanda mentioned this interesting headline that came out in The Economist a number of years ago. As well, if you look at the data for advanced economies, you can see that over the last few decades, women just coming into the economy, either in the United States or in Europe, because this is where we have better data, really have contributed about a quarter of GDP today. So that's pretty massive. And that's not even closing the gap, that's just narrowing the gap. And it gives you a sense, looking forward, of how much more can be achieved if you think about the fact that indeed more than half, or about half, of women globally are actually in the informal sector. And so some estimates have been made, and I'll just quickly run through them because I find that they're quite interesting. For advanced economies, there could be another improvement in GDP of, say, 9 to 14%, depending on the country and the region. In emerging markets, it's even larger. So just to give you some sense of what people have been saying, there could be an improvement in GDP in Latin America of about 14%. By narrowing these gaps in the labor market, up to 19% in South Asia, and quite a remarkable 27% in the Middle East and North Africa region. So really a lot to be achieved if we see a narrowing of the gender gap. And at a time of slowing growth, I think something not to be taken for granted. So that just kind of gives you a lay of the land, I think, and now we will look at what actually makes this happen.
Thank you for setting out such a compelling case. The IMF's recent report, Women, Work and the Economy, Macroeconomic Gains from Gender Equity, underscores the need to remove obstacles to women's full economic participation so some of the gains Jennifer laid out can be realized, to level the playing field. So given the benefits, it's hard to understand why so many countries still have legal or regulatory barriers to women's active engagement in formal economic activity. But so often, it's a simple lack of awareness among policymakers. When I started at the World Bank in the early 2000s, I remember the Vice President for Economics saying, "Do women really have any obstacles remaining?" And he came back to me a week later and said, "I've been doing some reading, Amanda. I had no idea that in some countries women are still legal minors, can't open a bank account without their husband's permission, that there are laws or social practices limiting mobility or the right to own land, and this impacts economic activity too. A lack of property rights means no collateral for a loan, for example." The World Bank Group produces an annual report called Women, Business and the Law. I will be sending a copy to each one of the ambassadors for your reference for the mission. Out of 143 countries reviewed, 128 still have at least one legal barrier that we can work on to help remove through our engagement in the Human Rights Council. To illustrate this important point for us, I'm delighted to welcome from Afghanistan, Camilla Siddiqui, who is one of Afghanistan's leading women entrepreneurs, providing employment now for over 100 people. But just 15 years ago, most girls were prevented from going to school, and those that did so had to do so in secret. Women and girls were not allowed outside without a male guardian. Camilla, please tell us your story. Why do governments need to ensure a level playing field?
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon for all of you. I'm really honored to be given the opportunity to share how my experience in Afghanistan, that how I create opportunity for myself and for other women that they are working with me. Afghanistan of today is not Afghanistan of 14 years ago. Today, women enjoy working with the government travel, study, and there is a lot of opportunity for women. I would like to share my experience of the Taliban regime. When Taliban came to Afghanistan, I was in the second years of college, and when they came, and I was not able to continue my study or work. My father and my brother flee the country to save themselves from political persecution. It was a very difficult time for me and my family. I discussed with my mother, how could I start some work and business to support my family and provide for their needs. I discussed with my elder sister, she was a master tailor, how can I learn tailoring? I learned tailoring and start this small business and start marketing for this business. It was very difficult to go without the family, without the men, to go to the market and do some marketing. I start marketing with my youngest brother and find some order and provide this order for this contractor. I contact with the community women, and I found some tailor to work with me. The business started. After very soon, we were able to create job for 100 women in my community. This business was it was a big support for myself and for my community. Has the regime changed and democratic government established in Afghanistan, there was women were again to step out from their family and participate in social and economic life. Afghanistan government announced open market in Afghanistan. It was difficult for me to compete with the broad product. As an entrepreneur, I always think, how can I find market opportunity and start some business? That time, I was working as a master trainer with Mercy Corps, one of the international organizations. There was a chance for me. I took part to participate in business development training program in Italy, in Turin. When I come back, I discussed with my country director, Mr. Michael Barrow, that I would like to start this business in Afghanistan. And he said that we don't have fund or grant for this idea. I told him that I don't need grant or fund, I just need your permission to start this business. And he gave me the chance, thanks for Michael. I started this business with one laptop computer, and today, since 2004, we implement 45 economic empowerment projects in all provinces of Afghanistan, and we had trained more than 6,000 women and men that how they can start their business. Today, in addition of Kawian Business Development Service, I have 3 more companies. One is export and import by the name of Navian Navid Limited. We export dry fruit from Kabul to different countries. Bauer Consulting Group, which is a research and monitoring and evaluation company. Recently, I launched the first owned taxi company, a woman-owned taxi company in Kabul, and provide some more jobs for people. And now more than 150 women and men are working in my different company, and we work directly with 9,000 farmers and for the dry fruit business, and 100 women that they are working in the processing center. That's all my story. I hope it was interesting to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Camilla, for that inspiring story, which has been captured in a New York Times best-selling book, Up the Back. So afterwards, Camilla will be there, and those of you who would be interested in buying a book and having it signed, it is called The Dressmaker of Khaye Khana. So there's such an obvious link between an enabling legal and regulatory environment, your personal success story, and your contribution to creating jobs and economic growth for your country. Everybody, you have another publication. This is the Economist Intelligence Unit Women's Economic Opportunity Index. There should be one for everybody in the room, and this is another resource, particularly for ambassadors and experts. At the back, you will find the indicators, and it provides a comparison across countries of the kind of enabling policies and laws that are helping women be economically active. But we know that while governments set the rules of the game, it is the private sector that is the real engine of economic growth. In that respect, large corporates have a particularly important role to play. It's now my honor to introduce Meeta Singh, who I first met when she was serving on the Private Sector Leaders Forum of the World Bank President. Meeta, you are Unilever's Global Director of Sustainable Business. You lead work in over 190 countries. So we often joke that Meeta is a mini UN by herself. Unilever has committed to the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, is a signatory to the UN Women's Empowerment Principles with the aim of empowering 5 million women by 2020. Meeta, please tell us why.
Amanda, firstly, apart from it being the right thing to do, it makes total sense for empowering women in our business because inclusion of women in the economic cycle magnifies the impact on growth of and health of not only their families and prosperity for the community, but also prosperity for our business. And Unilever being one of the largest consumer goods company in home care, personal care, water and beverages, it becomes important because the whole value chain, there are lots of women which we've identified as small growers, farmers, or as micro-entrepreneurs who sell our brands like Dove, Omo into rural markets, exposing a large women's cycle over there. So building capability within that value chain is extremely important for the secure supply chain. On the second hand, being such a large company, and 70% of the core consumer is a woman, and controlling 2/3 of the consumer spending, it's a very important target group and makes business sense to empower her. And going back again to being a large organization, we are a large employer, and it would be an absolute waste of talent, which women get dropped out of the economic cycle due to the barriers they face in their journey. So in short, with this total business perspective of why it makes sense for us to do this and take this commitment.
Thank you, Meeta. I think there's real power in this kind of organized approach that you've described at the corporate level. But we know that grassroots organizations at the NGO level have real impact too. And I'm delighted to introduce Benedicta Nanyonga, who runs Chinawataka Women's Initiatives in Kampala, Uganda, and is a winner of the International Alliance for Women's Top 100 Award this year. Benedicta, you're focused on empowering women in the slums, teaching them about human rights, and encouraging them to turn trash into cash by recycling. And I know it all started because of your concern for orphans with HIV/AIDS and making sure that you could pay their school fees so they could get an education. Please tell us your story.
Thank you very much, Madam Amanda. You all have my respect. My name is Benedicta Nanyonga, the founder and executive director of Chinawataka Women Initiatives, sister company to Chinawataka Strawberry Uganda, aged 66 years. Very strong, and although very young in entrepreneurship sector, we recycle used straws to wealth, a provision to a unique used product, and we empower the community, especially women, and then we create jobs. We conserve the environment, and we care for the girl children. It was 2003 when I was moving around to the neighboring house. I'm living in a slum area where I found a girl of 3 years with skin rash, and she was not feeling well. I asked why. They told me that the father died, the mother died of AIDS, and living with a grandmother. The grandmother was a very old woman. Also getting something to eat was very difficult. I requested the grandmother to surrender the girl to me. I took the girl to my house. Next day, I took the girl to the neighboring organization, Reach Out, who are caring for HIV people. The girl was treated. And I continue. I started with the one. I continue like that. But it was very difficult for me to feed them with the nutrition food. I was trying. Then 2006, I got a dream of collecting straws. I collected the straws, making some product from it. There's some people who admired it and they started buying. That's how I started taking this girl to the school, getting from that money. 2007, I got a person from International Trade Center called Simone Spitiano. He came and admired our product. He gave us an order of 100 soaping bags, which we delivered, and that money really helped me to help about 15 other girls, take them to the school, and also caring for them. I was so grateful because the girls now they are at school, although they are living with the HIV, but you can't know because they are on drug, and I'm caring for them. I think that's the story there.
And Benedicta is going to model some of her product. She's going to show you the skirt that she's got there. She's wearing earrings, a bracelet, her shoes, the bags, and they're available up the back too for you to look at on display. And while she's doing that, Jennifer is going to tell us a little bit about... Just that little soundbite.
And see my shoes. So many.
She's carried away now. She's a marketer. So there's a whole range of Benedicta's products up the back that you'll be able to look at on display after we finish the presentation. And Benedicta, we really salute you for the wonderful work that you've done, both recycling but also in allowing these girls to go to school. And Jennifer, can I ask you to tell us just why girls' education is so important?
Well, I mean, it's true that girls that do not go to school or have very little schooling have a tendency either to suffer violence in the home and to marry a lot earlier, and in fact, for that cycle to be repeated generation after generation. And I'd say vocational training is also critical.
And that's a perfect link now to Stella Jean, who is our final speaker, an ex-fashion model turned very successful designer with her own label, Stella Jean, and the focus of this evening's fashion show at ITC that we are looking forward to welcoming you all to as well. And I think Stella is a wonderful example of not only the vocational training dimension, but also the link with ITC in terms of the role that our international organizations here in Geneva can play in empowering women to empower others. Last year, Stella's collection was selected by Armani, so she is really top drawer. And as an entrepreneur with links to both Haiti and Italy, she has sought to share her success with other women. Please tell us about your business approach.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Stella Jean, je suis une styliste de mode. Ma collection raconte mon histoire. Une histoire au début assez compliquée et difficile. Je suis née en Italie, mon père est italien, ma mère est haïtienne. Donc je viens d'une famille multiraciale. Cette condition a été assez un problème au début parce que dans une Italie des années 80 qui n'était absolument pas prête à des réalités pareilles, ça a été compliqué pour moi de trouver mon identité. Je n'arrivais pas à me sentir italienne et je n'étais pas haïtienne 100%. C'est pour ça que j'ai essayé de faire comprendre à travers ma collection de ne pas avoir peur de rencontrer les autres cultures. C'est pour ça que j'essaie de faire la promotion d'une rencontre des cultures sans jamais négocier sa propre appartenance. Je négocie jamais le fait d'être italienne. Et vous pouvez voir ça dans la collection parce que la couture est parfaitement comme mes origines, donc italienne. Mais dans chaque collection, on rencontre une culture différente. On a commencé avec Haïti, Italie, et maintenant, grâce à la rencontre avec M. Cipriani de Haïti, j'ai pu découvrir les grands trésors du Burkina Faso. C'est ces tissus à la main, produits à Ouagadougou par ces communautés de femmes incroyables. Parce que ça a été une grande surprise pour moi. Je vous demande dans ces looks, quel est le tissu vraiment africain, vous n'allez jamais découvrir. Parce que c'est le tissu à rayures qui fait un peu british. C'est pour ça qu'il ne faut jamais croire aux apparences, quoi. Donc, grâce à eux, j'ai pu découvrir ces tissus et on a passé une première commande. Et à partir de la première commande, on a pu réaliser dans la deuxième collection des tissus on a commencé avec des tissus de 30 cm, on a pu réaliser des tissus de 1 mètre parce qu'on a fait des métiers à tisser plus grands, on a pu acheter et réaliser des métiers à tisser plus grands et c'est un énorme résultat en termes de qualité et quantité sur le marché. Et on est arrivé partout dans le monde avec cette image de mode éthique différente. C'est une mode éthique paritaire où le produit africain dans ce cas, parce que je parlais de tissus du Burkina, mais on travaille aussi maintenant avec les tissus du Mali, le Bogolan, et on fait les sacs au Kenya, et maintenant on travaille aussi avec Haïti. Donc c'est une petite collection qui résume un peu le concept des Nations Unies. On fait de la concurrence.
Thank you, Stella. I was very struck in reading an article about Stella's work by a journalist. Stella's unusual ethnicity and her desire to make ethically sound clothes, helping the poorest women in the world, makes her clothes as beautiful inside as out. And I think there's a real link between all of the stories of the women and the fact that they are helping empower other women through training. We've heard from Benedicta and Camilla about their role. I'd like to ask Meeta now about the Shakti program Hindustan Lever has, training the poorest and most marginalized women in Indian villages to become entrepreneurs. It's a very interesting story driven by business strategy and social conscience. Please tell us about it, Meeta.
Sure. So the story on Shakti started more than a decade ago. There were 3 challenges, 3 different target segments were facing. One was as business. To reach out rural markets was difficult due to lack of infrastructure and roads and access. Consumers in those rural villages did not have access to safe products or authentic products. They were looking at spurious products which were more harmful, paying the same price. And third were the NGOs who had set up these self-help women groups to support themselves. They needed some sort of economic activity to start making meaningful self-help groups to function. So then we started with joining these 3 dots, where we created a portfolio of products which were small size, low cost, relevant to that target segment, took the capability building which we internally do within organizations to these women, taught them to be entrepreneurs with simple things like how do you keep a bookkeeping activity, how do you manage inventory, how do you sell, how do you build confidence to step out of the house. And microfinance was just growing, so financing became another leg which finances women to set up their own businesses and sell home to home. So we started this journey with 17 women in Nalgonda in Andhra Pradesh, and today there are more than 65,000 in India, but it's gone beyond India to Bangladesh, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Pakistan in various adapted forms, and now we are starting this whole thing even in Africa, which also faces similar infrastructure problems of reaching into rural markets.
Thank you, Mita. You've raised also the importance of access to finance through self-help groups. As an ex-commercial banker and former chair of the Global Banking Alliance for Women, I know what an important enabler this is for women entrepreneurs. Benedicta, I know you started also a self-help group on finance. Can you tell us something about it very quickly, please?
Yeah. In our organization, we are about 275.
Mike?
Trained about 740. Sorry. We are about 275 women, and we trained 734 in straw product. As we are training, we could not get access to the bank to get money as we don't have the asset. So we decided to collect 1,000 per month. And then after getting about 500,000, we opened an account with the commercial bank. And whenever we sell our product, we take 25% to the bank. And at the end of the year, we share the profit, which has helped women in my slum area to take their children at school, to look after their families, and also to care for their needs.
Thank you. And Camilla?
Yeah. Access to finance is one of the biggest challenges in Afghanistan, especially for women in private sector. Most of the women that they have a small business and they need some loan from the bank. There is a lot of bank in Afghanistan, but the interest rate is very high, and also the collateral that they ask from the woman, it's difficult for women to provide because most of the property are by the name of men. But still, there is a lot of microfinance company that they provide loan for women for a small and medium enterprise, and it's a big support, and there is a lot of change on their business and their life. Thank you.
So, education and training, access to finance are both supply-side inputs, but there needs to be a demand for product too. And Stella is going to tell us a little bit more about why access to markets is so critical for business success, and I want WTO and ITC colleagues particularly to take note. Action points.
Je crois que la chose la plus importante pour l'accès au marché, c'est la communication et la visibilité. Donc, il faut avoir d'abord une histoire à raconter. Et là, avec le projet de ITC, on a vraiment une grande quantité d'histoires vraies à raconter au monde. Et c'est ça qui intéresse les médias du monde entier. Et tout ça, donc la communication doit passer par les médias, par une image, d'un mon point de vue esthétique, donc de beauté excellente. Et l'excellence passe par la qualité des produits. Et c'est ce qu'on travaille pour ça, pour faire des produits de grande qualité et pour communiquer une histoire. Et à travers tout ça, on arrive au public et on arrive aux clients.
So I would like, on behalf of everybody in the room, to thank the 5 inspirational speakers here today. And all of the women leaders we've heard from have in common their commitment to helping other women and to turning obstacles into opportunities with positive results that resonate way beyond the immediate beneficiaries. None of this would have been possible without the women themselves wanting to specifically target other women. So you could say that this kind of positive discrimination has been a game changer. Let's consider what kind of role it might play in other contexts. So Jennifer, last year, Christine Lagarde, who was the first woman to head the IMF, said, "Women represent half the working age population, but less than a third of the actual labour force. Women still face glass ceilings, glass walls, and even glass cliffs." Tell us a little about the research on positive discrimination, targets and quotas for corporate boards and in parliaments. It's still a controversial issue, but recent research data from the European Commission demonstrates that regulatory pressure can bring results, 2013 study from the EC, and that countries with quotas have in fact recorded some of the most significant progress in gender equality in both management and in leadership positions. Now, with the recent appointment of the first ever woman force commander of a UN peacekeeping operation, Norwegian Major General Kristin Lund in Cyprus, there's also the associated issue of how best to encourage women into non-traditional roles. Does having more women in senior roles and in parliaments begin to change outcomes? Jennifer.
Thanks, Amanda. It's true that people tend to say that this is a controversial issue, but I actually don't see it as so controversial, and certainly not from the information that I've read and the data that I've seen. It's true that you can say that on the con side, if you're looking at pros and cons, that it is not meritocratic, right? You're not picking definitely the best people. And also it can lead to tokenism and things of that nature. But in fact, the data that we have so far is showing that this is not bearing itself to be true. If you look at Norway, these sorts of concerns have actually not come about, and in many other places that have both put into place board quotas, or just targets, or parliamentary targets. And in fact, if you look at the pro side of the story, which is, my gosh, we've all been talking about how much talent there is that's not being fully utilized, and yet there are these cultural blockages. How much longer do we want to wait? And so I think really it's almost a logic question rather than a data question. It's quite clear that there are major benefits to be had, and therefore it makes a lot of sense to think about targets, to think about quotas, because we know that there are potential very, very positive benefits, especially in terms of increasing diversity, which we all know is very, very important both for policymaking and business.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer. And I think the example of Rwanda is a very interesting one. Africa leads the world in this issue of the percentage of women parliamentarians through Rwanda having the highest number at 66%. And there's regular praise for the transformation of its legal and policy framework over the last 15 years into one of the most equitable globally. So very interesting to look at the evidence base. Jennifer asked, how much longer do we want to wait? Data that I've read says that at current pace of change, another 140 years. So PR colleagues, experts to the Human Rights Council, those of us who are wanting to advance CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, let's make it a little earlier than 140 years. So I think Jennifer's set out a very compelling business case overall for women's economic empowerment, and the inspirational stories from our panelists demonstrate the need to, 1, level the playing field in terms of laws and policies, make sure that there's equal access to education, to vocational training, to finance and to markets, all issues that will be picked up in the post-2015 development agenda through the standalone goal and also through the integration of gender equality throughout all the other goals. So all of us representing countries here, we have advocacy to continue in capitals and in New York. Before we open for discussion with the floor, there's one last very important element which we began our panel with, and that is the role of men and boys. So here in Geneva, the group of women ambassadors feels very privileged to have a collegial cohort of male ambassadors also committed to this important agenda. We know your role is crucial. In relation to this, there has been a lot in the news about violence against women, and many of us have just come from hearing the Special Rapporteur speak on this subject. There's been a lot in the press about the terrible gang rape in India and the recent kidnappings of 200 schoolgirls in Nigeria by Boko Haram. So, both in our heads and in our hearts, there are very important cultural issues yet to be addressed. I'd like to ask the panel if they have any comments on the important role of men and boys in their particular stories. And I'd like to ask Camilla to begin.
This is the place that I have to say thanks for my family, for my father, my brother, that they gave me a chance, and also for my husband and my husband family, that they are educated family, that they gave me a chance that to be in this stage today. Most of the time, there is a lot of violence against women happen in Afghanistan. The main problem is economic. Most of the family that their economic is not good, there is a violence against women. And I think this, and also most of the time people think that in Islamic country there is no chance for women, and because of the violence and all these things. There is in Islam, there is a very, very good right and opportunity for women to work in Islam. And the problem is that awareness, that most of the people, they don't know awareness, especially the women, illiterate women, they don't know about their rights and about their violence. In this case, the main role is very important, and without the support of the men, it was not possible, and it's not possible for women to work, especially in my country.
Thank you, Camilla. I think you make a very good point. And the ambassador for the OIC, who is with us here today, often talks about this perversion of Islam. I was fascinated to read that, in fact, the Prophet's wife, Khadija, was a very successful businesswoman. And I salute my colleague also from Saudi Arabia in my visit to the Saudi Arabian Chamber of Commerce in Jeddah. The women there would say, we want to emulate the Prophet's wife and also be very successful business people. Mita, would you like to also comment on the cultural issue?
Sure. So while it's important that gender diversity, equality is there in all the layers, we had this insight more at the lower level, saying the men needed to respect the women, and even the Shakti entrepreneur, if she had to be successful, grow and fly, she needed the support of her husband or the male in the house. So with a small innovation intervention, we started recruiting even the husband or her brother or a male member in the family to basically service the smaller outlets on the borders of the villages, thereby making him understand what she was doing and make them coexist, respect each other, and make it successful. So we started that in 2010, very successful. Men are supporting Shakti. And the Shakti Man, or the Shakti Man as we call it, the 30,000 now in the 3 years. So it's good for business, good for Shakti, and good for the men.
And Shakti means strength, so I think there's real strength in that togetherness of both women and men. So now I'm delighted to open the floor. We are honoured by the presence of a number of ministers with us today. And before I invite the Albanian Minister of Information and Public Administration, Ms. Melina Harito, to take the floor, I would like to invite Arantxa Gonzalez, who is heading the International Trade Center and has done an extraordinary job in a very short time to give us her thoughts as lead discussant. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I guess my job has been made very easy by what you have heard today. But nevertheless, let me just share a few thoughts with you. And I'll start with a quote from a well-known woman who says, and I quote, We cannot change what we are not aware of, but once we are aware, we cannot help but change it. This woman is Sheryl Sandberg, CEO of Facebook, but I think it fits perfectly with what we are trying to do today. Events like this one are extremely important to make us aware of where we have to intervene. What is it that we have to change? And let me just maybe wrap up some of the comments you heard from Stella and from Benedicta about what we are doing in the International Trade Center to make sure people are aware. It's called ethical fashion. It's called linking women artisans to markets through fashion. It's using fashion as a development vehicle. It's a long road, granted. This road is long and it's full of obstacles, but you have seen those obstacles can be surmounted. But once you surmount the obstacles, let me just give you a flavor of what happens. 90% of the micro-producers we have worked with under the ethical fashion, and these are thousands of women, have improved their dwelling. 88% of them say that financial independence has changed their lives. 100% of them told us they now have gained respect. So it's also about dignity. And 84% of them have told us food for their families is now much better. So we are not talking about we are not just talking about theory, we are talking about real impact on the ground. Now that we know, I guess, now that we are aware of, the second part of this discussion should be about how can we change it. Now, let me give you two areas where I think we have work to do to change it. Area number one, we have to change mindsets. And on this one, each and every one of us can do. But we also can change economically empowering women, but making sure we provide opportunities. We build the capacity of these women to be active part of our economies. We exercise a bit of positive action for women economic empowerment. Why not use government procurement, reserving part of government purchasing for women, small and medium enterprises? Finally, we can do much more to link women to markets. This is not just a public endeavor, it's a public-private partnership. And what you have heard and what you have seen today is a clear demonstration of that. But if I had one message to give you, it is in our hands. It is in our hands to change it. There is no need to wait for another 140 years to change it. If we work at home in each one of our countries, and if we work by making sure the collective framework called Post-2015 Development Agenda has a good doses of women economic stress, economic empowerment, maybe we will shorten this long road. Amanda, this is what I would say.
Thank you so much, Arantxa, and we're all very much looking forward to being there to support you tonight and with Stella Jean at the Ethical Fashion Show. It's now my honor to invite Albanian Minister of Information and Public Administration, Ms. Milena Harito, to take the floor. Thank you, Minister, for being with us.
Merci. Honorables participantes, chers participants en minorité aujourd'hui, d'après ce que je vois dans la salle. Nous savons très bien aujourd'hui que le développement durable ainsi que la démocratisation socio-économique peuvent être atteints seulement grâce aux efforts d'indépendance financière et de l'émancipation des femmes. Ceci est un des objectifs du millénaire et il y a à cet égard toujours beaucoup à faire, bien sûr, comme l'a dit aussi Madame González. Mais aujourd'hui, je voudrais me concentrer sur le rôle des femmes plutôt dans les hauts niveaux de direction en politique et en management. La participation et la représentation des femmes à la prise de décision sont bien sûr des indicateurs d'une société qui a embrassé l'égalité des genres dans toutes les sphères de la vie. Et je voudrais d'abord vous parler de législation sur la représentation des femmes et des hommes dans tous les secteurs en Albanie. Notre législation exige une représentation d'au moins 30% dans toutes les instances gouvernementales et politiques. Cela comprend tous les postes de décision dans l'administration publique, que j'ai l'honneur de diriger, l'appareil judiciaire, la police, et de tous les citoyennes engagées dans les processus politiques électoraux supérieurs. Une des réalisations les plus importantes dans ce domaine, dans le domaine de l'égalité, a été l'approbation en 2008 d'une loi sur l'égalité des genres dans la société. Cette loi s'est référée en particulier au principe de la Convention sur l'élimination de toutes les formes de discrimination envers les femmes, ainsi qu'aux recommandations de l'Union européenne, puisque nous aspirons à en faire partie, et vise à éliminer la discrimination directe et indirecte dans l'emploi, dans l'éducation, dans la santé, et aussi dans tous les autres domaines importants pour la promotion de l'égalité. Cette loi de 2008 a été l'aboutissement de longues années de travail au sein de mécanismes gouvernementaux pour l'égalité des genres et a témoigné d'une bonne coopération de tous les acteurs concernés. Le succès de cette négociation a été couronné par l'adoption d'un quota de représentation d'au moins 30% des deux genres dans tous les organes du pouvoir législatif, exécutif et judiciaire, et dans toutes les autres institutions publiques. Cette quota neutre du genre a été inscrite aussi dans notre code électoral et a ouvert la voie à l'obligation légale pour les partis politiques d'inclure au moins 30% des femmes dans les listes électorales. Ceci pour les candidats aux élections parlementaires et aux élections locales. Maintenant, venons à la pratique. La loi est nécessaire, mais il faut aussi suivre. Donc, l'application de cette loi sur l'égalité des genres ont montré quand même un effet immédiat dès les élections de 2009. Comme je l'ai dit, la loi a été approuvée en 2008. Donc, dans le Parlement sorti des urnes en 2009, les femmes occupaient 23 sièges sur 140, environ 17%. En revanche, dans le gouvernement, il y avait une seule femme sur 15 ministres, donc une représentation de 7%. Maintenant, parlons des élections législatives d'il y a un an, donc de juin 2013, dont je suis aussi élue. 17% des femmes ont été élues membres du Parlement, comparé donc à 16%, 16,5%, soit 27 femmes sur les 140 sièges. Et là où il y a la réelle différence, c'est que dans notre gouvernement, il y a 6 ministres sur 19, donc il y a 30% du cabinet qui est constitué de femmes. Mais ça ne s'arrête pas là. Il y a une tendance de la représentation des femmes aux postes de direction et de management où il y avait eu une tendance à la baisse entre 2009 et 2012, et nous arrivons, on était en 2012 à 29% de représentation de femmes au poste de haute direction dans l'administration publique, et depuis notre gouvernement de septembre 2013, nous sommes maintenant à 47%. Donc nous sommes tout près de l'égalité parfaite sur les postes de haute direction dans l'administration publique. Et de plus, dans les postes plus bas dans l'administration publique, dans les niveaux inférieurs, il y a environ 65% des femmes. Donc les femmes sont surreprésentées, je dirais, dans l'administration publique. Dans le système judiciaire, pour la période 2009-2013, nous sommes à environ 42% de femmes. Donc il y a aussi une tendance à la hausse pendant cette période dans le système judiciaire local. Donc ce que je peux dire pour conclure, c'est que les politiques gouvernementales ont exprimé clairement, surtout après les élections de 2013, que le gouvernement albanais veut soutenir ces questions de l'égalité de genre. Il a montré par des preuves concrètes. Il y a eu une augmentation substantielle. Et évidemment, c'est pour formuler, mettre en œuvre des politiques qui soutiennent en général la participation des femmes dans l'économie et faire de cette structure une opportunité pour que le poids réel des femmes accroisse dans l'intégralité de l'espace et de l'activité du pays. Maintenant, je dirais, c'est à nous, parce que ça ne suffit pas. Il faut que nous puissions montrer que nous pouvons quand même faire la différence. Je vous remercie.
Merci, Madame la Ministre, de cette intervention très pertinente. Vous êtes l'exemple par excellence de l'impact que peut avoir une femme ministre sur la politique générale. Alors, c'est très bien. J'invite maintenant quelqu'un du secteur privé, Madame Tess Mateo, the PDG de CX Catalysts.
My name is Tess Mateo, and my company, CX Catalyst, made a commitment to empower 10,000 women in green economy businesses, specifically in clean energy, clean water, sustainable food, infrastructure, and health. As countries and corporations transition to green and inclusive growth, it is so important to introduce women into high-growth, high-margin businesses. Governments and companies around the world plan to spend an estimated $6 trillion in the next 2 decades on their green transformation initiatives. My question is not just for the panel, but for everyone in this room. How can each of us help women access and successfully pursue the $6 trillion green economy opportunity? Most of the wealth creation in the industrial and in the information technology revolutions went to men. Sir Richard Branson, billionaire serial entrepreneur and CEO of the Virgin Group, likes to say that climate change is the greatest wealth creation opportunity of this generation. CX Catalyst creates women-owned micro-entrepreneurs in solar energy, in clean water with these water backpacks that you see around the room. But we also do water infrastructure because, as Arant just said, the post-2015 SDG Sustainable Development Goals, which will be initiated in this fall in the General Assembly, is all about making sustainable, green, and inclusive procurement both in the private and public sectors. And what's wonderful is that the ITC has actually launched a global platform for sourcing from women. So I urge everyone in the room to get more involved in helping your women in your countries, in your constituencies, in your networks access the $6 trillion opportunity. Thank you.
Now my pleasure to invite my colleague, the Ambassador for Saudi Arabia, His Excellency Faisal bin Hassan Trad.
Thank you, Excellency, dear Amanda. And also, I welcome the distinguished guests from our Women's Society. You know, they say that this world is a male-dominating society, but if I want to talk about this room, it's indeed a women-dominated society. I will not take a long time from the distinguished presence here. I just want to highlight a few useful information about women empowerment in my country, Saudi Arabia. For those who have a little about information about Saudi Arabia, we are almost as big as Europe. I think we're bigger than Europe in size, but we are only 30 million inhabitants, 21 million Saudis, and the rest are expatriate. But of course, Saudi Arabia has long recognized that the development of its women, in fact, is a key element in its national march to progress. As a principal aim of the development strategy of the kingdom, the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, is highly encouraging female empowerment in order for women to become active members of the society where their roles are defined in terms of what they can offer towards their country, economic, social, and cultural development. In fact, a major priority of the Saudi government has been diverted to the guarantee the right of education. And if I may give some statistics here, Your Excellency, 1975, the total expenditure on education was not more than $500 million. Last year, 72 billion US dollar was dedicated to the education. Now we have 6.2 million students, 52% are women. Now we have 150,000 Saudi students studying abroad, 90 countries almost. 30% of them are women. In fact, a large proportion of the Saudi Arabian wealth is in the hands of our women. As it was rightly said by you, the first businesswoman in Islam was the Khadija, the wife of Prophet Muhammad. And this was more than 14 centuries ago. And in fact, she was a very powerful businesswoman. And Prophet Muhammad was an employee, in fact, to that. Yes, this is a fact. I mean, before he became a prophet, but this is the fact. And then she married him, or he married her. In fact, almost 30,000 private sector establishments are owned by Saudi women. Indeed, the empowerment on the level of their political rights, recently 30 very important and influential women joined the Shura Council, the Saudi Parliament, which about 20%, because we have 150 representatives there, 20% of them are women. In fact, according to the list of the most powerful women in the Arab region, 14 Saudi ladies is on that list, taking the second, the third, and the ninth position. Two other important things about women in Saudi Arabia. I think we are in the front when it comes to the equality of their rights. And to make this very clear, all our regulations when it comes to the social and to the salaries being paid by the government, it is 100% equal. We don't have a special program for women or a special program for men. If there is a director general a woman or a director general a man, they will receive the same allowance. In fact, women have more exceptionals. She can take 2 years free holidays to take care of the family. And very recently, we announced 1 or 2 major changes that women can take off a holiday of even 10 years if she has to go abroad with her husband. If, like in myself, my woman was a working lady and I'm an ambassador going around, she can take a holiday for 10 years, and when she go back, she will still have her place waiting for her. So we do understand the challenges for women, but I felt a little bit worried when I heard this 140 years. That's very scary, I have to say. Perhaps we should try to understand why it takes that long, But I think we should read it differently. I'm quite confident that if we're talking about the equal rights for women to have equal rights and equal footing on men, I don't think you need 140 years for sure. I don't think at all. It's need more education, and when people knows their rights, I think they will easily claim it. But if you're talking about gender, I mean, I was thinking very carefully about this terminology, gender, and I have to say it's a little bit challenging for me, the world of gender. But if you're talking about equal rights, I can assure you that there is no obstacle to reach that. But gender, if you're talking about, I look different. I mean, the man looks different than the woman for sure. So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. Thank you very much indeed.
Very much, dear colleague. I think there was a lot for us to take away, and we're delighted by your challenge. It needn't take 140 years. So, as Arantxa says, it's in our hands. I'm now delighted to invite the chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women in Law and Practice, Frances Radé, to make an intervention. And please, those of you who would like to take the floor, please raise your hands so that we can include you to make an intervention or ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Amanda Ellis, and thank you and the other ambassadors for putting this really important issue on the agenda of the Human Rights Council. We have seen and we see these exceptional women in front of us, and they are wonderful pioneers. Our job, all of us, is to make sure they become not the exception, but the rule. And in that, there is still quite some way to go. They will remain exceptional individually, but we want them to be the rule socially. There is a severe leadership gap. There is still a severe leadership gap in international and national financial and economic decision-making institutions and in companies. Just to give a few of the figures, out of central banks, less than 10% of central bank governors are women. In international financial institutions, in GATT, World Trade Organization, and the International Monetary Fund, very few women in leadership positions. You can count them on the fingers of one hand in all those institutions, literally. If you look at the 2,000 top performing companies, 1.5% had female CEOs. China is a total exception, with 51% of CEOs last year women, but that is in private, not in public companies. In other words, there's something that needs to look into here about why the development is not uniform. Well, we have seen the enormous importance of women in taking a full part in business, corporate, and economic and financial activities. And it's true on the macro level, as we've heard, macro statistics, but it's also the micro level. Companies with women on board have been shown to do better in sales, in return on investment, and in sustainability in times of economic crisis and fewer bankruptcies. So it's important at the micro level as well as the macro level. But what do we do? What are we going to do about the leadership gap? Well, the working group in its report to the Human Rights Council supports quotas as one of the means to promote women into economic leadership. It's been used in political leadership with some success, not enough yet, but with some success. It needs to be used in economic leadership. And I want to pinpoint some of the reasons why it's so important to have women in economic leadership at the macro and at the micro level. Firstly, and one of the most important things is that one of the things that is invisible and of which we have not yet been made aware is that transnational corporations are causing disparate harm to women. The emerging agenda on corporate responsibility has not yet taken on board that in export processing zones, these are feminized work enclaves, wages are lower by between 20 to 50%, hours of work are 25% longer, and women are the victims. Sweatshops, women are between 85 to 90% of workers in the sweatshop industries, and we've all seen the horrific results in the recent Bangladesh factory fire, but this is not a one-off. Women are the victims of sweatshops. The extractive industries, a report was done by UN Women on this, showing how land dispossession disparately affects women land users. Often they are not the landowners and they are not compensated by the extractive industries or by the growing tourist expansion industries. They're not compensated for loss of the use of the land. The owners, who are their husbands, are compensated. So in all those respects, women who are in leadership should pull their weight in making the business community aware of these gendered harms, these harms that disparately impact women. And then also, in macroeconomic decision-making, there are two major trends emerging which disparately affect women. They're not emerging, they have emerged and they are continuing, and that is the growing inequality. Women are at the lower end of the chain of production and of recompense, and therefore they are not gaining from this growing inequality. This growing inequality is a gendered inequality, and it's time it was recognized as a gender issue, as well as an economic justice and social justice issue. And the other trend that is disparately affecting women is the privatization of services. The privatization of services, including services, health services, the services for the disabled, and services for childcare. Privatization disparately affects women who even now are do the vast majority of the care function of society. So women who have arrived at leadership positions, I call on you to increase the awareness within the corporate world, and I want to see a lot more women arrive in those leadership positions. Thank you.
Thank you. So calls for more women in leadership, but women and men also needing to carry the mantle. I'd like to now invite our colleague, the US Ambassador to the Human Rights Council, Keith Harper, and also a very warm welcome. It's wonderful to have you with us here in Geneva.
Thank you, Your Excellency. First, let me start by congratulating for this panel. I can see the energy in this room, and it is inspiring on such a critical issue, and I'm really honored to be with you here today. The United States recognizes that women can neither be truly self-sufficient nor fully contribute to the country's economy unless they can sustain themselves economically. To that end, we assist women entrepreneurs and women involved in development efforts, including rural women, through numerous programs. For example, the United States supports the work of female artisans through the Alliance for Artisan Enterprise, a partnership with the Aspen Institute. The Alliance is a platform that enables companies, nonprofits, governments, and international organizations to collaborate and grow artisan enterprises, provide best practices, services to the organization that support them, and support the broader recognition of the importance of artisan sector to development, economic growth, and preservation of cultural heritage. Recent UN sessions and processes have championed women's economic empowerment. The United States supports UN Women's work in empowering women economically, which is one of the organization's key priorities. The main outcome document from 2014 Commission on the Status of Women session, the agreed consultation on the challenges and achievements in the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals for women and girls, talks about advancing women's economic empowerment. and the Equal Future Partnership Initiative has economic empowerment along with political empowerment as key components. We thank today's speakers for sharing their unique experiences, their successes in overcoming obstacles, offer inspiration to women and girls throughout the world. We look forward to further engagement and support your efforts to improve the status of women economically. I just would like to close by saying this work to us is vital, it is essential. I look forward to working with you in partnership to further our objectives. When you empower women politically, economically, and socially, you empower nations. Thank you.
So well said. I want to write that down. When you empower women economically, socially, and politically, you empower nations. I think that really embodies what we've heard from the panel today. That was beautifully said. And of course, the US is one of the first countries in the world, I think, to appoint a global ambassador for women's issues. And I know Australia has followed suit, but you're really walking the talk. So thank you very much. And now my honor to introduce from Madagascar, the founding member of the National Council of Women and the Vice President of the Indian Ocean Network of Women Entrepreneurs, Madame Fanza Razakabuana. Welcome, lovely to have you here in Geneva.
Thank you so much, Amanda, Ellis, and everybody here. It's a pleasure for me to be here for Madagascar and to represent my country, not only my country, but also all of our entrepreneur women. I am a manager of 3 companies in my country, 2 companies for specialized in screen printing, and 1 company is in restaurant. I would like to talk first about the situation of women entrepreneurship in our country. I'm the vice president of an association named FOI, Entreprendre Féminin Océan Indien à Madagascar. So it's an organization that we have 450 women in Madagascar now, and we are representing 15 regions of Madagascar. We try to do our best to sensibilize all of women to join our association, but we could know that we have so many efforts to do because we have 20 million of inhabitants and 50% of women in our population. I would like to tell you that now we are very sensibilized for the combat, for the participation of a decision in macroeconomic, because we are in the 15th rank in Austral Africa for the participation of women in economic environment. So I would like to tell you that Madagascar women in Madagascar now are ready to work together, and why not in fashion with different culture? We have so many different material. So I suggest and invite you to see all of our products that I bring with me here. Stella. Voilà, donc je continue sûrement en français, mais en tout cas, Madagascar est prêt pour un partage d'expérience. Nous sommes là aujourd'hui pour défendre les intérêts. Il y a beaucoup à faire dans notre pays et nous sommes convaincus que si nous sommes ici, ce n'est pas un hasard, mais c'est un rendez-vous. Et comme on le dit dans notre slogan, seul invisible, ensemble invincible. Merci beaucoup.
Seul invisible, ensemble invincible. Oh, ça c'est très bien. Excellent. Thank you. Now, I understand that we have the UN Association of the USA's Youth Observer to the United Nations, Tiffany Taylor, in the room. Tiffany, if you are here, can you please wave? Fantastic. Can we have a microphone for Tiffany, please?
Hi, thank you. It's great to be here. I just had a question. What do you see as a particular role for youth in empowering women and narrowing the gender gap?
What do you see as a role for youth and young women?
As the role for youth in empowering women and narrowing the gender gap.
Fantastic. The role for youth in empowering women and narrowing the gender gap. That is such a good question. I'm going to invite each of the panelists to give their views before we come to our final speakers, Her Excellency the Ambassador of Montenegro and the former head of Business and Professional Women. So, shall I start? Which end shall I start? The role of youth. Camilla.
The role of women?
Of youth in empowering women.
And narrowing the gender gap.
Okay. I think the role of youth is very important, especially for the gender gap, because most of the youth that they have a very good idea for and a lot of energy for working and implementing of some project. I think it's very important to focus and support the youth.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd say, at the World Economic Forum, we actually do try to do a lot in this area, and we do integrate some of the young cohorts that we have, like the young global leaders and the global shapers in doing this. And I would say, I would echo what Camilla said in the sense that the youth of today are tomorrow's leaders. And I think that you have to take up that leadership role today and make sure that you carry that through to tomorrow.
Je crois que les jeunes ont un rôle fondamental, même parce qu'avec la facilité de communication qu'on est capable de faire, on peut arriver dans tout le monde dans quelques secondes. Et dans tout ça, il ne faut jamais oublier ses propres traditions. C'est notre valeur en plus. Donc, regarder le futur, mais amener avec soi la valise de sa propre tradition.
The role of youth and role of women amongst youth extremely important because you can actually shape the future of tomorrow, not only just in the social context but also in the entrepreneurial section. By training, vocational training, not just trying to get them into jobs but being their own bosses. You can start that right from the young.
Yeah, in my country, they have been given education, but not vacation. So it is very important to train our women in vacation and also to see that women are in vacation so that they can train other women, as they say that give me a good woman, I'll give you a good world.
I'd now like to invite Her Excellency, the Ambassador of Montenegro, to address the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Amanda. You are doing a great job, and we are all so proud of you today. I would like to thank the panelists for their enlightening presentations and very impressive success stories. Creating more stable and just societies where women and men will be equal in exercising their rights is impossible without creating equal opportunities for their participation in economic life across the sectors, all sectors and throughout all levels of economic activities. We should always remember, however, that elimination of violence against women and protection of women's rights to access education, health and maternal care are interrelated with the promotion of economic development and the economic empowerment of women. This is even more important in the post-conflict countries and post-conflict regions. The issue of economic empowerment has been particularly important for the government of Montenegro since the economic crisis had more of an impact on women when it comes to the labor market and the regional unemployment rate. My government has renewed its commitment to the gender dimensions of the national employment policy. Support for women's empowerment is strengthened by a new national strategy for female entrepreneurship with the objective to transform access to resources, fiscal and investment policies, and decision-making. Important activities have recently been launched in order to support women who are just starting up their own businesses. Open Day of Female Entrepreneurship is regularly organized in collaboration with the Ministry for Human and Minority Rights, the UNDP office in Montenegro, with the support of delegation of European Union. Madam Chair, as was confirmed in many recently published ILO reports, women are in a disadvantaged position in comparison to many labor markets around the world. When world leaders call for sustainable economic development, they should commit to the gender perspective in the post-2015 Millennium Development Goals. Women economic empowerment is essential for sustainable development. In addition, the biggest international credit and monetary institutions, which are UN affiliations, the IMF and the World Bank, should renew their commitments to, and I quote, you mentioned that, gender equality and smart economics. One way to do so is to include the requirement that every IMF operation must examine the potential impacts of its austerity and consolidation measures on gender, and for the World Bank to adopt mandatory safeguard policies to mitigate the risks associated with its investments on the most vulnerable, women, girls, and marginalized groups. For example, equal benefit from the bank's poverty education project. I want to emphasize that my delegation is committed to continuing to support events like this in the future, and I want to thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to welcome to the room High Commissioner Navi Pillay, who will make our concluding remarks after the last two speakers from the floor. So now my pleasure to invite Frida Merkelis, who has been the International President for Business and Professional Women for the past 3 years, before the Honourable Minister from Namibia. Thank you, Frida.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and can I congratulate you on this superb afternoon and this exemplary panel that is before us. You yourself have been a great champion of empowered women, and I think both in your previous roles with the New Zealand government and you really literally putting your money where your mouth is and supporting women in the Pacific Islands to your work at the World Bank is really an example that we all admire and respect. And let us also congratulate Ms. Gonzalez on the occasion of the Joint Advisory Group meeting here at the WTO and the work that she is now leading under the Women in Business and Trade program, and in particular the work that is being done, which my colleague Tess Mateo referred to, with the Global Platform for Action on sourcing from women vendors. That platform for action, which is available to all of the developing, least developed and transitional economies, is what happens when women come together. And the example of that is 3 that you have just heard from today. There are hundreds of these stories that are now emerging, and it is really exciting to see when we have leadership at the top, such as that before us. And I think the other issue that we need to address here is, of course, the value that partnership brings into play. When we have companies like Unilever who understand the extreme worth and who are willing to partner with civil society, with the United Nations and with other groups to really be able to advance the status of women and propel what we're all trying to do. I think it's very timely that we should be having this discussion, and I think it highlights the fact that we absolutely need to have a standalone goal on the economic empowerment of women. And that is a decision before each and every ambassador in this room. That is where the rubber hits the road, and that is where your commitment can really show the world what we can create. Everybody has a role to play, Madam Chair, from the parents who teach their girls and boys the values of what they are worth and what they can do, to the governments who can influence policy and break down the barriers, the attitudes and the inherent cultures that have stopped women from advancing in ways that we know are possible, to the private sector who can be a fair employer and who can really address the issue around equal pay for work of equal value. I think I would like to conclude by just saying that Victor Hugo sums up the time that we are all at in the moment. He says that there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Well, that idea, ladies and gentlemen, is the idea that the economic empowerment of women as a transformative engine can propel growth not only for families and for communities, not only for societies, but for the nations of the world.
And thank you, Frida, for the transformative work that you've done over the past 3 years at the head of Business and Professional Women. Now my honour to invite Her Excellency, the Honourable Minister of Labour from Namibia, to take the floor as our final speaker.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the floor. Allow me, first of all, to congratulate everybody in front there for the great opportunity and great offer you have given to our rural women, especially the lady from Uganda, India, and you name them. That's a great job you have done, colleagues. And you have set an example for us all that we should think deeper and think about our rural women, that whatever we do, we have to empower them. Really, it's very, very important. I've learned a lesson today from this platform, and I call upon you guys, ladies, that you should continue with this type of platform. Once we have got an occasion like this one of ILO, come forward and assist us. Let's exchange views and the networking to one another. We give information to one another. Maybe to say a few on my country, it's a land issue where a woman can operate on. It's difficult to get a land, very difficult. So I'm seeing it that the more we are sharing this information to one another, maybe you'll give us idea how you are acquiring the land. Maybe to your country it's not so cumbersome, to us it's very cumbersome. The other issue on decision making, I was the Minister of Gender Equality. Maybe I just took 2 years, then I was taken to another ministry, reshuffle. Politicians are living with that. So this year is our D-Day in Namibia, 2014. November, we'll be having elections where we have demanded 50-50, zebra style. When we talk about zebra style, we talk a man, woman, men, women. If you don't come up with that, any political party, I don't know what will happen to you, but my party is dedicated because they've already amended their laws, their constitution, their political party. So 50-50 to our political party. My party where I belong is already a green light. So what I would like to comment mostly is on the land issue, which we don't have as women yet. But there are laws in place, but they are making difficulties for women, really, to get a land. Difficulty, as I'm talking myself here, I'm somebody who was in exile, but I came back to Namibia without a land up to date. We are 24 years old, no land. So even though you think of a project to empower other women, where will you put them? It's very cumbersome.
maybe the way we are exchanging ideas will help one another, how you guys, you manage to get land, so that we can influence our governments. Otherwise, for 50-50 for women, this year, come November 2014, this is our D-Day, that we have to achieve that 50-50, to promote other women to come into power as we are. I think these were a few remarks which I wanted to share with you, and maybe assistance. I've seen a lady with a light there. Maybe we meet, we share information so that we try to empower our women in Namibia too. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Honourable Minister. I think the idea of zebracide is going to stay with us all, 50-50. And I would like to thank Namibia for the groundbreaking role that your country played in Resolution 1325. We know that it was a pivotal role that you played, and thank you very much. It's been a groundbreaking advance within the UN system. It is now my great honour to introduce the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, whose commitment and passion for this critical agenda have inspired all of women ambassadors and our male colleagues here in Geneva. You've done a wonderful job for us, and we're so delighted that you were able to make time to come and give today's closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I truly feel like I've missed the best part of everything here. Our wonderful chair, the distinguished panelists, and of course all of you who've made contributions from the floor. But let me also say I have very good colleagues who briefed me a little on what the discussions were about. So let me, in my concluding remarks, first salute the group of women ambassadors in Geneva. This has become a tradition, and they really are able, such a small group, to bring so many of us together. Really, congratulations. In the past few decades, there has been enormous progress towards the empowerment of women in various aspects of life, but this glass is still only half full. Today, we are focusing on the economic empowerment of women. Decades of experience demonstrate that wherever there are enabling environments in which women have access to education, to skills, to jobs, and above all to choices, it is not only the individual women themselves who flourish. Women's economic empowerment can unleash a surge of prosperity, positive health outcomes, and greater freedom and well-being for everyone's benefit. Empowerment begins with education. Women and girls must be able to build up and sharpen useful skills. They must know that they have real options for employment and financial independence, and in this respect, progress is on the march. In recent years, girls across the world have enrolled in and completed school at far higher rates than we have ever seen before. We are laying the foundation for a generation of girls and women to engage in society with vastly greater opportunities to make personal choices and to make their voices heard fully and fairly, from the household to the workplace and the highest levels of government. Now comes a but. But this progress is not without backlash. The powerful tidal wave of women's empowerment can erode and ultimately break down social and cultural norms that have for centuries assigned women to inferior roles and fewer choices. Thus, although women's empowerment brings clear benefits in terms of fundamental human rights and the increasing well-being of families and communities, it may also threaten those who grasp onto the old ways of subjugation and inequality. What can we do about this? We certainly need laws, laws that mandate the equality of women and their equal access to resources, laws that mandate education for every single girl, laws that give women equal rights to inherit and own land, laws which clarify that women do not need permission from anyone to choose their own jobs and their own partners. We need laws that prevent and, where necessary, punish violence against women, and we need them to be implemented to create a safe environment free from violence in which women and girls can flourish. We need programs and policies targeting specific economic opportunities for women, such as initiatives to ensure access to finance and markets, and efforts to address women's unpaid work as carers. But we also need greater social dialogue, not only with women, but also with men and boys. We need to make it possible for everyone to realize that ensuring women's human rights does not threaten or take away from the human rights of men. Gender stereotypes can weigh heavily on men too, and in reality, relinquishing rigid ideas about each person's allegedly proper place in the community contributes to far greater freedom and well-being for everyone. We need leadership that inspires others to overcome challenges. We need to showcase the impact of empowered women on society and thus change prevailing attitudes and negative stereotypes. We need a comprehensive approach. Not all the obstacles to empowerment are external. In too many cases, we see talented, capable women and girls shy back from opportunities that are open to them because they fear they are not good enough. So we also need to work supportively with girls to help them develop self-confidence. Strong role models and mentoring can help build in every girl and woman the conviction that they are just as capable, just as talented, and just as legitimate as men. And events like this one today signal the changing tide on women's human rights. The word is spreading among women, men, girls, and boys, and slowly justice and equality are becoming the norm. The pace of change will accelerate as more and more girls and women are freed from discrimination that held back their mothers, aunts, and grandmothers and become empowered to seize opportunities. This is the path towards more prosperous, peaceful, and just societies for everyone. But we all have work to do here. I was just discussing with Ms. Gonzalez here the importance of having data, because so many governments respond to us by saying, yeah, but there's equality in our country. There's no difference between men and women. We have a constitution which safeguards them. It's data that tells us how many women are employed where, are there salary differences, is violence against women being addressed? So I really urge you all to help us to gather the information because these are the tools that would support our argument for equality. And thank you very much for participating in this panel discussion. I trust that all of us have gained new ideas and inspiration for the work that lies ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, High Commissioner Pillay. We're really going to miss you. I would like to especially thank Ambassador for the African Union, Ehuzu, for making the translation available today, along with the Government of Canada. Thank you so much. And to sum up, you did a wonderful job. We started with two aims. One was why is women's economic empowerment important? And I think beautifully summarized by our new American colleague, empowering women economically, socially, and politically empowers entire nations. A no-brainer. And so, second point, as you finished up, High Commissioner, what is it that each of us is going to commit to do today from household to the workplace to the highest levels in government, showcasing the impact of the power of empowered women. Nelson Mandela said, "Everything seems impossible until it gets done." Arantxa said, "It's in our hands. Let's go get it done, zebra side." Thank you, everybody.